On June 24th, 2022, the Supreme Court of the United States overturned Roe v. Wade, which had protected women's reproductive rights as the law of the land since 1973. This decision came after a flurry of new state laws from conservative states tested Roe by drastically restricting abortion access. These state laws were led by SB 8 in Texas, which took effect in September 2021 and had two main components: restrict abortion window to within 6 weeks of conception, and encourage civilians to sue aiders and abettors. Soon, Oklahoma and several other states followed suit with their own copycat heartbeat laws.
I am Reverend Deneen Robinson, pastor of Unitarian Universalist Church of Oak Cliff. I also am the Director of Religious Policy and Strategy for the National Birth Equity Collaborative. When I think about Roe, think about it first knowing that my daughters will begin their consideration of their reproductive choices from a place that I didn't even have to think about.
We have currently stopped providing abortions at Tulsa Women's Clinic since the governor signed the total ban into effect. May 19th was when that happened, 2022. If we were to provide an abortion outside of the very few exceptions that the total ban allows, then we as the clinic, me as an individual, any staff member, our physicians, any funding organization, any person who assisted the patient into getting to the appointment, covering the cost of the appointment, could be sued for up to $10,000. These laws basically deputize private citizens into being able to be bounty hunters, essentially.
The vigilante part was designed to cause fear and create divisiveness among people in community.
This type of law and how it works is, it started in Texas. Texas first passed SB 8, which banned abortion and after fetal cardiac activity was detected on a sonogram, which is typically at about 6 weeks. And that went into effect September 1st of 2021. We did have one physician in Texas who purposely violated the law to try to bring suit and try to get into court, and the suits never came. These laws are meant to deter physicians and clinics from providing abortions.
It's the creation of laws thinking that that's going to stop you. What they're doing instead is causing people to find other ways to get their needs met.
I think it's really important to recognize that, these bans don't stop abortion. Women still get pregnant. Women still decide that they don't want to be pregnant. Women will still find a way to access care. Bottom line is abortions are still going to happen.
When you say the word pro-choice, those are two little words, but there's so much more. Our family, our society, nobody talked to young women in 1969 about getting pregnant. I was 17, so I turned out to be pregnant in a small town in Texas where it was not legal to get an abortion. I had $200 in my hand and my sister's birth certificate because you could not get an abortion anywhere in the United States without being 18. My boyfriend got me a ticket. I left my house at 7 o'clock in the morning, lying to my parents about where I was going. I flew to Washington, D.C., which is one of the few places a woman could get a legal abortion. And even then, I knew it was what you would call a back alley abortion clinic. In my world, when a girl got an abortion, her life pretty much was over.
I am pro-choice because in 1974, I found myself pregnant. I was 15 years old at the time. I waited for several weeks before I told my mother, and she took me to the doctor, and he confirmed that I was between 18 and 20 weeks along. We waited a couple of weeks before we told my father. A little background on my father. He was a misogynistic, brutal man. He took it upon himself to find out where he could take me to get an abortion, even that late in the term. I woke up early one morning, and he apparently put something in my orange juice that morning, because as we were driving just a few miles from home, I began to feel very sleepy. And I woke up completely disoriented, and I didn't know where we were. He had taken me across the state lines to a place in Kansas where they perform late-term abortions. And I'll just say that he was a butcher. I remember my father basically shoving me into the back door of this doctor's office. They don't call it a backdoor abortion for nothing. And I want to tell you that yes, I was young. I was pregnant by my first love, and I wanted that child. I wanted that child. I began cramping, and I can just hear myself screaming, "What is going on? What are you doing to me?" And the assistant, I guess it was his nurse, said, "You little slut, that'll teach you to be having sex with all the boys in high school." My mother had no idea what was going on that day. When we got home and she saw that my clothes were soaked in blood, obviously she knew what was going on.
I never thought of the word rape, but we had sex when he wanted to have sex. Whether he was beating me up or making up sex or whatever, it was almost nightly. I was 16 when I got pregnant. And there were no choices after that. I was getting married. I was getting married soon. There just weren't any options. I tried to go to school after I got married. The school kicked me out for being married. And I had a baby. Then I had twins, and I had a very violent, cruel husband. Honestly, if I had had an abortion, I might have gotten out sooner or later. I don't know. But I did the best I could. I wanted people to understand how different it was and how hard it was before Roe versus Wade. You do not want to go back to that. You have to fight for your rights.
I was born in March of 1971, and I'm adopted, which means that my biological mother did not have a choice. She had to carry a baby before Roe versus Wade. About 2 years ago, I started my search to find my biological family. So I finally found my biological father after 50 years. He died 20 years ago. As soon as I told her who I was, she said, "Yes, I'm your biological mother." We talked for about an hour, and, shortly into the conversation, she tells me about my conception. It's pretty awful to hear that you're a product of gang rape. I felt so much empathy for my biological mother, for what she did and what she had to go through. But I also felt the empathy that she didn't have a choice to have an abortion. I think my story is a little poignant because now we're going back there again. So now you have my instance where I find out I'm a product of gang rape. My biological mother went through therapy for years because of this. Now I'm in therapy. I just told the half-sister yesterday, because I'm going public with this, that her father is a rapist. And now I bet she's in therapy, or hopefully is going to get therapy. I don't know. I don't know when you find out your father is a rapist, what you do. It's traumatic.
7 years ago, I started a chaplaincy at Southwestern Women's Clinic. And when SB 8 was passed, the 6-week ban here in Texas, we translated that whole experience to a travel program, which takes about 20 of the poorest patients who come to the clinic. Some of them are just getting medication. Some of them are having procedures. We pay for everything, and we meet them here early morning, and we put a chaplain in the group with them, and we travel with 20 patients to New Mexico. And we're going to keep doing this as long as we can. First Unitarian Church of Dallas is important in this whole thing. This is where the Roe v. Wade case began. The women of this church were studying the issue of abortion. They weren't all on the same page about the procedure, but they ended up on the same page about having agency over your body.
A couple of our leaders in the Women's Alliance, the First Unitarian Church of Dallas, came back from a Women's Federation meeting saying, we need to look into this. They're asking us to study the issue. This would be 1969. So the next spring, we had a 4-session study group, and we talked it over, and we had gone from, well, maybe the law in Texas wasn't too bad, to we've got to get rid of this law.
They wrote the first amicus brief. I have it here. It says, District Court, May 5th, 1970. A woman has a fundamental right to decide when to bear a child. Nothing influences the quality of a woman's life more than her responsibility to bear and raise children. They go on. This is 2 pages of an amicus brief in which they sat in the courtroom in support of this right.
There was a lot of organizing done in Dallas first, and then throughout the state.
Before that, this was the church of Ann Richards, who was the governor of Texas. Before she moved to Austin, Cecile Richards was running around as a little girl right outside of the window here in the playground. And there were many people in this church who were progressive on this issue, including Dr. Boyd, who started the clinic here in Dallas, was doing abortions before they were legal. The ministers of this church were driving patients to the Gulf of Mexico to get on international waters to have abortions. So there's a long history of this whole issue of Roe v. Wade here in this church.
I had an abortion at 17. I'm 56 now, so that was a few years after Roe. And it was a seemingly easy procedure. My religious beliefs supported me being able to get an abortion, because if one chooses to parent and doesn't parent well, then they are worse than an infidel. So knowing that I was not prepared to parent, it was an easy decision. It was not something held over me. There was no shame involved. It was just necessary, and then we move on.
But we've been preparing for this for a long time. Progressive clergy of all kinds, all over the state, we're on the forefront of how to lead. In this church, we have the Roe history. We hand out Plan B at the front desk. We just had a whole service on abortion storytelling in which I told my abortion story. We have a whole wall in the fellowship hall of abortion stories. There are about 50 stories written out by members of the church to lift the shame off of people's backs and what they've been carrying. Some people have told me they hadn't told anybody about these stories, especially the men. One of my messages about this work is that people of faith are not all anti-abortion. We are in this for the long haul, and we're going to make a difference.
I fell in love with my next boyfriend. We got our marriage license the day I turned 18, and the next day we were married. And he wanted children. It wasn't long until I was pregnant. At approximately 4 months into my pregnancy, I began to spot. I miscarried in the bathroom the next day. I was devastated. My husband was devastated. Fast forward into my 2nd year of marriage. I took the pill for a while, and then I quit, and pretty quickly I got pregnant. Again. We were going to be the American dream. And then I miscarried again. He became a little abusive because he was man enough to get me pregnant, but I wasn't woman enough to have his baby. So I left that marriage.
When I was 12, I was visiting my father And I had started my period the year before, but I went walking to the pool in my bathing suit, and this guy had stopped in his truck and asked me if I wanted a ride to the pool. And he was cute. He looked like David Cassidy. And so I got in the truck. We're driving, but we didn't go to the pool. He said he wanted to go get some beer, so we went to the store, and I started to get a little nervous because I was 12, but I wanted to act like I was older because I wanted to be cool. So I didn't say anything. And he got back in the truck and he said, "Oh, I got to go to my house to get my bathing suit." And that made sense to me. So we got to his house and I had to go to the bathroom. So I went inside and he started kissing me and, put me on the bed, and he raped me. I didn't think it was rape at the time. I don't know what I thought it was. I thought, okay, I guess I'm his girlfriend now. But he didn't treat me like his girlfriend. Afterwards, he just told me to get dressed. And he put me in his truck and he went and dropped me off about a block away from my dad's house. He never took me to the pool. I didn't tell anybody. I went home and I told you I had started my period, but it didn't come back, and I didn't think anything of it because I had just started and I didn't know much about periods, and so if I'd missed, I was kind of glad I didn't get it again. After a while, my mom and I realized I was pregnant. Luckily, 5 years before, Roe versus Wade had been passed. So she was able to take me to Planned Parenthood. And they treated me so well. I remember it just being like a regular doctor. It hurt a little bit, and it was over. And I haven't really talked about it until now, and I'm 57 years old. I would never have told this story, I don't think. And I'm mad that I have to. I'm angry that I have to tell my deepest, darkest, painful story to everybody because I feel like I must, because it is so important, because I don't want anybody else to feel alone, and I want them to understand the Supreme Court can't do this to us women. We're not going to sit still. And I'm going to keep telling my story. And I hope somebody listens and does something.
When I was 23 years old, I had an abortion. I had figured out that I wanted to go into law school and help make the world a better place. I had dreams, I had visions, and I got pregnant. And I made the very hard decision not to put my life on hold, but to have an abortion and to move on with my life. I've had a great life. If I had decided not to terminate my pregnancy, I wonder what would have been different. My baby didn't die that spring. I killed the idea of one. I don't have any regrets.
One of the things that I'm always asked about is, what about life starting at conception? I make no claims about this. What I always say is, for my religion, my Unitarian Universalism sees the person in front of me as having dignity and worth. The potential of that embryo is unknown. Jesus said, love one another. He did not mean love some unknown potential inside of a woman's body. He said, love one another, the people who are in your life.
I wanted to give the perspective of someone who did not choose to have an abortion, and I have 7 beautiful children who I love very deeply, and I'm glad that my life is this way, but I also made the decision to have those children from a very different perspective than I hold now, and so I thought that might be helpful to share. I grew up in a religious household. The church that I grew up in was my church family. I was early 20s. We joined a homeschooling parachurch organization that did not believe in birth control. The men were the leaders of the household. God knew better for your life than you knew. And so because he knew better, he planned the family, and you didn't have a say in the size of your family. About 7 years into my marriage, I started experiencing abuse. And that was something that when I went to the elders of the church, I met a lot of resistance as to what options were for me as a woman. Divorce was never really talked about as an option. I was told that if he saw us suffering, that might make him want to provide better and be more supportive, and stop what he was doing and the behaviors that were happening. And that was not my experience. So I did end up leaving that marriage, and I realized how much support and friendship and church family I lost going through divorce and the stigma that divorce holds. I did receive full physical and legal custody of my children since abuse was involved. But even if legal paperwork says, child support is $365 a week, I've never received that amount. It's almost, 100,000 delinquent at this point. But even coming from a very privileged place where I have access to some things that others do not, I still work 13-hour days a lot of the time. I work 3 jobs. I've been denied for food stamps, making less than $30,000 a year. While I would never make the decision to go back and not have the children that I have, I hate that I can't give them more.
My body, my choice! My body, my choice! My body, my choice! My body, my choice!
We live in a time where people can just lie and punish people because of their own personal agendas in the name of God. What in the entire hell is that?
When I met my husband, there was just something so different about him, and yet so loving. He's such a gentle man. My biological clock was ticking. I quit using the pill, and we tried and tried and tried, but I never got pregnant. I saw my gynecologist regularly. She made suggestions on, how to increase the chances and things like that, and it just never worked. So finally one day she said, let's do a sonogram. And as she was doing it, she said, have you given birth? And I said, no, I told you I had 2 miscarriages. And she said, then what happened to your uterus? She said that my uterine wall was completely detached from most of my uterus, and that it was blocking the fallopian tubes. It was not the way it should be. And I said, well, what could have possibly caused that? And then it dawned on me, and I began to cry. I was devastated, a victim of misogyny, but yet married to the man that I wanted to spend the rest of my life with. How was I going to tell him? And this is why I am pro-choice. My life is the reason I am pro-choice. I never want another woman to have the kind of abortion that I was forced to have. I never want some young girl not to be able to have that choice and have it done in a safe, sanitary environment with people who know what they're doing.
Yeah, Ashley and I met a few years ago. I saw how she was with her daughter, and I just fell in love with her, fell in love with just everything about it. We got married recently, but even before that, we were trying to have a kid. It just wasn't happening.
When we say we're trying to have a baby, we really, really want another baby. One of our biggest things that we had talked about before we really decided on, yes, we do want another baby, is he was worried about us going through an ectopic pregnancy. You don't think about it in the moment whenever you're going into that doctor's office and you You're hoping that you're going to see a baby. You know, you're hoping that you're going to be pregnant if you're trying.
The doctor confirmed that Ashley was pregnant, but she could not locate the embryo.
And when you go in there and they tell you there's nothing on a sonogram, there's no heartbeat, but you're supposed to be 7 weeks along, and you're testing positive for pregnancy. If it's not, you know, in your fallopian tube or your cervix or your ovaries still, it's outside your uterus, it's on your organs. There's no way that that group of cells is ever gonna grow into a healthy child. You know, it'll kill me. And if we don't have access to health care before it becomes fatal, before we're going to the emergency room because we're gonna die, that's not fair. You know, you can't just strip away rights, fundamental human rights from women who have already had those rights and know that that's their safety, not only for myself, but for all women, and my daughter included. You know, my nieces, my friends, my closest friends, my sisters, my family, you know, and your family.
Abortions are going to continue. They're just going to continue in more dangerous ways, and they're going to be harder to get for the people who have the least resources in our communities. And this issue has to be addressed because this is the public health crisis that we're facing.
I knew what an ectopic pregnancy was going in. Like, I didn't realize that the only answer for an ectopic pregnancy is to get an abortion. You don't get a choice. You will die. You will die if you don't get that medicine to take care of yourself or get a surgery that you need.
We're basically forcing citizens to flee their home state, become, you know, what I've called a medical refugee. That's what we're doing. And, you know, for some it's easier than for others. But abortions are still happening. Oklahomans are traveling. We saw it firsthand after Texas passed SB 8. Oklahoma became a sanctuary for Texas. Nearly tripled our volume of patients that we were seeing here. And so, you know, now Oklahomans, Texans are just traveling further. However, you know, because these bans disproportionately affect, you know, women of color, Indigenous women, women of poor socioeconomic class, you know, women that can't travel, women that cannot afford to take off work to get out of state, women that don't have childcare for their other children at home, you know, women that haven't told anybody else that this is what they're trying to do and they're forced to do this on their own and come up with, again, the cost to do it. There will be a lot of women who unfortunately will be left with no other choice than an unwanted pregnancy and, you know, what I call a forced birth.
I was born the year of the burn, baby burn year, born and raised during the Black Power movement, and growing up as a little girl in the 70s, learning about Roe versus Wade, seeing it on television, the idea that I would have more rights to my body, and my daughters in 2022 do not have the right to their bodies to do what they choose, and being a descendant of people of African descent, that this country was built off of the rape of my ancestors. The fact that this country, when we talk about sexual assault and sexual trafficking, the first bodies that were sexually abused and sex trafficked were my ancestors. And then the land of the indigenous people who was then land taken from them, and then they were sexually assaulted on their land. And then we're being told that, okay, so a survivor of sexual assault, sexual trafficking in 2022, they can't get an abortion. It's a lot of nonsense, a lot of BS. And it's been a long time for change. And we are the change. We have to be the change. And the change takes work. It takes work. So be a verb.
When we made our decision about fighting the law, we had several reasons. Not only privacy, not only the government should stay out of it, but especially disadvantaged by the law in Texas.
And actually, if people understood the history, they would understand how they've been hoodwinked. This is a complete racist agenda from the start. They have reached the culmination of what they have been trying to do for all these years, which is to try to turn the tide on the number of white babies being born. They don't care about babies once they get here. Because if they did, they wouldn't be using funds that would go to support people who are pregnant and support families that are low income to fund crisis pregnancy centers, because that money comes from the same place. So if it was really about the baby, the family, then these things wouldn't be happening. The goal is to preserve white America. And, you know, as someone who serves as an abortion chaplain, I will continue to help folks get abortions.
From a previously very pro-life perspective, I would have said pro-existence versus taking in consideration quality of existence and what the life would be like for children brought into the world whose parents don't have access to basic human needs.
I am an alcoholic. I was admitted into a psychiatric facility for alcoholism and suicide. While I was in rehab, on day 2, pulled me aside and told me that I was pregnant. I was absolutely terrified because I was in no way, shape, or form in a position where I could have a baby. A week after I was admitted into the psychiatric facility, I was released, and I immediately called the abortion clinic in town and scheduled an abortion. The decision to do this did not come lightly, but I knew that if I tried to keep that baby, I would most likely end up dead due to my mental health and my new sobriety. I believe the abortion saved my life because abortion is healthcare. I am now 465 days sober. If what happened to me happened a year later, then I would be absolutely screwed. It's almost scary to think about because I have no idea where I would be.
At the age of 24, I had my abortion. I had just lost a job. I found out that I was pregnant. At that time, a very good friend of mine showed me a website where I could get access to medication to do my abortion at home. I went to aidaccess.org and provided my driver's license photo, other information about when my last period was, how far along I had thought I was, and paid $120 US to have medication shipped from India to take at my home. There were instructions that were sent to me that were very clear on which pills to take at what time, possible side effects that I would feel, and etc. I probably waited 6 weeks to get my pills in the mail. And of course, I only found out that I was pregnant anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks, because you have to wait a full 4 weeks or 28 days for your next cycle to show up before you ever even know you're late. Getting very close to having to have a surgical abortion and having to pay $900 to $1,100 for an abortion at a time when I had no job, no upcoming interviews, no money coming in. Finally got my pills in the mail with my instructions and was able to get everything taken care of from my comfort of my own home, the support of my partner and roommates and friends.
I have walked 3 different roads that I had the freedom to walk. I got to make a different choice every time. I had an abortion early on after I had a really traumatic, horrible thing happen that no woman should ever have to go through. And I chose to have an abortion. And that was my choice. Shortly after that, I was still in a bad place, not a great relationship. I got pregnant again. And this time I made another choice to have the baby, but to place her in open adoption, because I knew that I wasn't ready, but I had options. but it was my choice. I got to choose, I got to say. And now I'm at a good place. I have my own son and everybody loves everybody and it's beautiful. But again, that was another choice I got to make. These choices that shaped me and allowed me to grow and become the woman that I am now today.
I'm Kit. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm here today to talk about reproductive rights. As soon as I found out that Roe versus Wade was overturned, I just felt a chill run down my spine. I'm not a woman, but I have all the parts that women do. I'm still lumped in with women. I am still the kind of person that the right is trying to control. I heard the news and I went out in the streets to do what I could to help. And I didn't stop to think about what this means for my child and for her future, that she won't have the choice that I had.
I live in Florida. My granddaughter has 2 dads. One of them is my son. He's trans. He had to have a medically necessary abortion earlier this year. I'm scared. I'm angry. I'm here learning what I can do, taking this information back to Florida so that I can take action steps to protect my kids. I'm attending a school board meeting next week to remove comprehensive sexual education from the Duval County School Board curriculum so kids won't even learn how to prevent pregnancy. Contraceptives are going to be banned, IUDs are going to be banned, and abortions are going to be banned. So not only do they want our kids to not be able to avoid and know how not to get pregnant, once they get pregnant, they won't be able to do anything about it.
The Supreme Court decision is just, to me, devastating because I know the impact that it had in having the abortion, what that did for me in my life, and I've never, ever regretted it. I was able to go to college, I was able to have 2 healthy kids, within a 2-parent household. All things I don't know if I would have been able to do had I been forced to carry the pregnancy to term. And I'm just so grateful that I had that benefit. I'm just really devastated that this is not an option for some women right now. There's a lot of us out there. Our stories are, different. But we all have to live our own truths. We all have to do what's right for us. And, it's just heartbreaking. I really hope that this wakes people up. I wish they would have woke up way before this because we knew that this was kind of coming. It's not really a surprise, but I really hope that it wakes people up and they get out the vote.
I had an abortion and I was 21. It was my choice and I had the choice. Adoption is not a band-aid for abortion. A lot of adopted children have a lot of issues, and a lot of birth mothers have a lot of issues having to get up that baby, because that's not an easy thing to do. My biological mother didn't have a choice. Here I am to put it in your face, and that's my purpose. It's taken me a long time to figure out my purpose, but I figured it out. Because you know what? I'm pissed.
When we rage around the fires where our mothers smelted the bones of their backs in kitchens built of bricks and sticks and stones stuck in their pretty little necks, where they stewed their souls in mixing bowls full of fury and the frosting of cakes. When we rage, we grind our gears through a supreme ink-dark night on a one-way ticket to a better state of being, where our bodies are not public housing, where we grind our teeth against the buzzing of the flies that swarm the stitches of our mouths sewn shut. When we rage, we hiss like the million serpents that made Medusa's bitchin' braid when she was stone cold banished pregnant by Senator Poseidon, punished for pissing off the powers in their ivory Olympic towers, their rotundas, their domes. When we rage, we roll through the black holes of our non-state sanctioned bellies, through our unlicked wounds, the empty tombs of our wombs, where our fury, our fire, our embers, our coals, our ashes, our souls have already risen again. When we rage, we rain away the pain of the frayed ends of a world we've outgrown, where our colors hold, where we're bald and barefoot, and butterflies and milkweed and prairies gone to seed, where we dance around fires we built and blankets we quilt from the things that we refuse to throw away. And when we rage, we reach across races, in aisles, in years, in miles of the sins of the fathers, and we find that our arms are long enough to hold us, and that we are tied together by a string we can't even see. And the string is in you, and the string is in me. And when we rage, we rise. Like the suns in the skies, we wait up to see. We climb trees, soft with moss, dance to the roundness of jazz in kitchens full of granddaughters and dogs, in little pink houses where babies and ice cream are made, and fireflies and the faces of children glow. And we know that our rage is a bridge to where we want to go, to the world we war for and we dream of. Because when we rage, we love. When we rage, we love.
I'm just angry as I can be. We worked very hard for Roe v. Wade, but it's almost 50 years.
There is no society that is worth living in as long as women cannot make the most fundamental choice and decision about their future and the future of their families. But I've never understood why men don't take responsibility and don't find a way to stop getting women pregnant.
It took a lot of work to get where we were. Women didn't have to travel to take care of themselves. There are just too many reasons for people to need an abortion. We have to have it back, and the work goes on.
I've never in my life voted. You know, I'm sure people will say what they want to say about not being involved beforehand and being involved now, but I'm pissed.
We all make hard choices, and we all have to decide for ourselves what is right.
If this can happen for abortion access, this can happen for same-sex marriage, this can happen for transgender rights, this can happen for voting rights.
They keep talking about abortion, 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 because they don't want us to see the rest of it. Most people would not have voted for these people to be in office if they understood that this is really what you're going to lose if we lose Roe. We have to start telling people, no, it's the right of refusal, honey. It's the right to your privacy. Those things were strengthened and were no longer vague as a result of Roe. The Lawrence case, which also happened here in Texas, the same-sex marriage case, the contraception case, all those were built on Roe and right to privacy, which is why I say that's what they're coming for.
They're not going to stop. They're going to keep going until they take everything away from you. And I understand when people get worried about gun rights or you know, I don't want to take a shot for COVID. You don't want to, and I'm with you. Well, I don't want to be forced to almost die before I get health care.
This isn't just about abortion. This isn't just about my body or anybody else's body. It's not about babies. It's about our rights to bodily autonomy, to individuality, to make our own choices, our rights to personal freedom.
We have to fight. We have to stand up and we have to fight and we have to speak about what's right, and this is not right.
I'm angry. I'm angry, but really most of all, I'm afraid.
Elections matter. If we don't show up and vote for people that care about these issues like we do, and that's local, state, federal, so important to pay attention to who we're voting for and, you know, how they represent us.
I want us to remember, especially in Texas, where transgender children and families are under attack right now, women are not the only ones affected by this. Men and non-binary people give birth too. We are capable of carrying children too. So don't forget us.
Because I'm adopted, I'm not supposed to be pro-choice, apparently. I've always felt it's a woman's right to choose whether she wants an abortion or not.
What we keep hearing is that every election is the election that's going to change the world. And it's not true. It's actually a long, long, long game. Every election for the next 20 years is going to be important.
We need to vote. Men, women, everyone needs to vote.
The one thing that we can do is vote. We're ruthless now, so vote.
If you've thought about, I don't want to vote for the less of two evils. Well, I think we just learned what not voting does.
And get your friends to vote, get your moms to vote, get your dads to vote, get your brothers to vote, get your sisters to vote, and vote blue. Do it for your grandmothers who fought so hard for these rights that we are losing.
Those of us who knew what to do, who knew how to fight, we're tired and we're old. And we didn't think we'd have to be fighting for this either.
Which reminds me to urge you guys to vote, and especially in your local elections. It begins small and at home and works its way up.
If you are scared of what's happening like I am, we need your vote.
When you walk into that voting booth, think about the real life implications of what life will be like for women who don't have free legal access to abortion, the right to choose.
Volunteer. Help get people out there. Encourage others to vote. It's so important.
It's your representatives, your senators, your local officials. These are the people who are passing laws trying to control you. So get out and vote in every single one of those elections.
50 years of hard work. Don't let them take it away from you.
We need your vote in red states, in blue states, in primaries, in midterms, in local elections, in state elections, even down to your city council.
Stand up for yourselves and each other, please.
We're not going back.
We're not going back.
We're not going back.
We're not going back.
We are not going back.
We're not going back.
Okay, we're not going back.
And we're not going back.
We're not going back.
We're not going back.
We're not going back.
No vamos a retroceder.
We're not going back.
No vamos a retroceder.
We are not going back.
Row, row, row your vote.
We're going to have to row, row, row your vote.
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 We're not going back.
We're not going back.
Row, row, row your boat. Vote.
Okay. Marion?
I'm sure I'm not the only one that did that.
I got a whole blooper reel.
So there you have it. It's that simple. Row your vote. But you might be wondering, what about my story? With so many important worthy causes and crises in our country right now, why this issue? Why was it Roe v. Wade being overturned that finally got me out of my white privileged blue California bubble? What inspired me to finally quit my corporate working for the man job and officially start my film career by hitting the road in 100-degree weather in the summer of 2022 to meet so many amazing, passionate people across the land and to help tell their stories. Your stories. Our stories, America. For if it wasn't for my own abortion in high school, I wouldn't have had the freedom to live my life the way I wanted and to make this film. And so much more.